Alright, so as you can see, we've got it all set up. As I understand it, this end is supposed to be the head end with the pole, so you get that pulled up off your face, gives you some more headroom to sit up, and the other end is the foot. You could definitely on the foot end, if you wanted to prop something in there to make that pull up higher, you definitely could do that if you had an extra trekking pole or something of that nature. So here's kind of why I switched to this from the Duplex. The Duplex was great. I never really had any major issues with it. I did have water in it a couple times because of issues with a long pad, and I would often, well, this is the head end here, but on one end or the other I would slide into the mesh, push the mesh out from under the tent, and then we would end up with a puddle of water inside. And that's happened more than once, just whether it's the pad slipping or I move around a lot on the pad, which ends up shimmying it down the tent. But that said, we actually have had that issue with the Offset Duo. So we went to this because of the 50-inch wide floor. Now that's good because I use a men's wide long pad, which is 25 inches wide, and Stumbleina uses the women's Thermarest X-Lite, which I believe is 23-ish inches wide. And when we're both in the tent, especially on the old Duplex, we would push out the mesh pretty far, and I was concerned that we were going to end up tearing it up, tearing the mesh. So when this came along, I ended up selling the Duplex to a friend and then picking this up because it has a 50-inch wide floor. But what we found is there's definitely now room. We've got a little bit of room on each side, which is great, but the issue still becomes if you slide down, it will still push out the mesh. The other thing that we figured out, and that I'm going to say is a con to this, the pro being it's wider, but from what we were able to tell on our AT trip, the width came at the cost of the vestibules now seem smaller. So that may not be a big deal for you, but what we found out one night in heavy rain is we had the thing buckled down, and it's like this setup right here, it's pretty high off the ground. So you had plenty of air movement. We had no condensation even in an all-night rain. But what happened is because this is narrower, right here on one side, it pushed out. The mesh pushed out under the vestibule side, and we ended up getting water in there. So just something to think about. You got to make sure things aren't pushing underneath the side of the vestibule, because like I said, the angle seems to be tighter on this because you've got that more floor room with about the same footprint of the tent, so you've got a different angle to work with. So just one of the cons we found. Other than that, so far I haven't really found any cons compared to the Duplex. Like I said, either tent you could have condensation if you're set up in the wrong spot or not enough ventilation. It slightly weighs more than my Duplex, but again, for us the issue was the floor space we needed to have two people. So this is still worth it to me to carry as a one-person tent when I'm by myself, because it's still, I'll have to put the weight in the video. I don't remember now. I'll give you some specs when I sit down on it, but I don't remember what this one is in the burnt orange, because it is a heavier Dyneema. Similar to my Duplex was the spruce, which was also a heavier Dyneema. So other than that, I mean, it's been comfortable. Like I said, it does the job that I bought the tent for. Comfortable sleeping for two people, waterproof, easy setup, easy takedown. If you saw when I took it out, it was stuffed. I found that I can roll it much smaller than the stuff sack it comes with, but I found that just in practicality, stuffing just seems to work better in most situations. I don't know why, it just seems like it kind of, oh, I know what it ends up being. If you roll this, and if you fold it up and roll it, packability was an issue for me. So for the pack that I used, the Bears Ears 50, and I tried to get it one time in my Sub Nero 28 liter pack, I couldn't. It was too wide, and I didn't really want to store it vertically. So what I found is if you stuff it, you can then scrunch it down even smaller once it's in the stuff sack and make it fit where you want to. There's a limit to that, but it was more compressible, therefore it was easier to get in other places in my pack. So that was one thing I noticed with the Duplex. I could fold and roll it and it fit in every pack I had. I guess I never tried my running vest, but it's a little beyond the scope of what that's for. So just some things I've found so far. Hopefully this one will do as well like the Duplex did. I mean, it had a ton of nights on it, a lot of miles on it, and like I said, only time I ever had an issue is I think I caught the mesh one time in the zipper and slightly tore like one little piece of mesh. I was able to patch that. Other than that, I never had any leaks or any tears, any holes on the tent. So I'm expecting the same out of this, to be durable, long lasting for what we use it for. A palace for one, and definitely plenty of room for two on short trips. So I've unzipped the door, pulled it back. There is another thing I thought of that some people may not like that is different from the Duplex with the zip models. The door on one side, which for us is the foot side, if what I understand is correct, which I guess makes sense in a way to me too, because if you're breathing on the other side, the condensation would primarily be there. So if you want it open, that would make sense to me to have the head side more open to get air through and evacuate that condensation out. But these doors are actually fixed because they are tied through the line lock to the stakeout point. So that's something to consider. They no longer have the rainbow doors on these. As you can see, it's a D shape, so it opens only on that one side, which I guess makes sense since you're not opening over here. But that's just something to think about. These do have peak vents, as you can see up here, so I'm not sure how much that helped, but like I said, we were in some conditions on the AT, and that does have a pretty decent amount of opening up there compared to where it's overlapped. You probably got 3 inches of Dyneema before it goes to mesh. But the rain condition we were in with this button down, I definitely have been in rain like that or probably worse in the Duplex and had condensation inside. I think at one point during the night I did wake up and I remember just kind of checking things out and feeling a little dampness above my head. But by the morning time, there was nothing in the tent. So just something to think about. As you can see, inside, pretty roomy. Like I said, you can fit two 25-inch wide pads side by side in here. Like I said, for one person, it's definitely it's luxury room, let's call it that. So just something else to think about if you're curious. It does have, as you can see, a little storage bag. There's one on both sides, which is nice. I have usually put my glasses in the little sleeve I have for them in there at night, and my headlamp, just so if I need to get up in the middle of the night and use the bathroom, I can just grab it out of there and go. So trying to think here. So it does have these little pull cords. You can use that to kind of pull tension on the side over there up to the little loop and kind of keep that, foot area from pressing down as much. Like I said, we just kind of end up going on one end, we go to this end, heads down here, and then I usually put my pack under my feet here. But that can be precarious because depending on the slope, it can end up sliding around. I haven't put my fin light under the pad in this just to see if it would slide less, but I've also considered maybe putting just a couple silicone strips in here just to kind of keep it from sliding around. So just some things to think about. Like I said, that's, if you want to call those cons, like the door system compared to the Duplex is different. You can't open both doors. So if that's something you like, that is definitely something that is not available on this setup for the tent. But I do think, at least personally to me, I generally never left both doors open on either side, but kind of having the prop, which you could do that with a trekking pole and your regular Duplex if you wanted to. Just having it there, I don't mind the extra weight of that little pole personally, but that's me. But I just think the vents, and maybe it sits a little higher than my Duplex, but it definitely seems like the airflow through it is better for preventing or eliminating condensation before it becomes a problem. So So as you can see, this is a long wide Thermarest X-Lite and a women's model X-Lite side by side, and as you can see, it's not pushing down on the mesh. You got a little bit of space, definitely space down here at the foot area because they're both tapered, but so you can see those fit in there really nicely. I don't know how you're going to be able to see it, but just so for me to be in here by myself, I'm trying to be careful because I can set this up on random crap on my backyard. So, but you know, I could definitely sit down in here if I'm by myself and have a ton of room to have a pack explosion, inflate my pad. You know, especially if it's raining and you've got to do everything in the tent, you've got plenty of room solo, which is kind of why I generally take the solo, because I kind of wanted a one and all tent where no matter what we were doing, it worked. So, but as you see, you know, with the pad, there's plenty of room. You know, I'm sitting up in here. I can sit up, you know, pretty far over, and with that peak over here, with that lifted up, just gives you, especially if you're solo, you could center yourself in this thing and have tons of room to sit up, prop yourself up, and not have any issues with draping the wall or hitting the wall or any of that stuff. Got bugs in here, but